Guys, we gotta talk. So, I just finished the book I said that I was reading in the last episode, VALIS, Philip K. Dick. This was heavy, man. Okay, I prepared some notes actually for this one. I'm a little bit more prepared because this book was insane. Not a super long book. Once I sort of had a little bit more free time. But also, I'm in Los Angeles right now, so we're no longer. If you saw the setting last video, we were in Cleveland. We're in LA now. I think this will be the spot for a little while. But once I had a little bit of free time, I was able to finish this quite quickly. This book is insane. Okay, I have a lot of stuff to cover. I think this might end up being maybe 2 videos. I'll do one now. The thing is, I wanted to wait and sort of think about the ideas a little bit more. And sort of come up with exactly what I wanted to say, and I guess like build more of a thesis or like more of my argument for or against some of the ideas within the book. But at the same time, I can't wait to talk about it. If you guys see, I have this my book. I take all my notes in here, and I have some good notes for this video. First, let's just start off with what is VALIS, right? So VALIS is this. It's a sci-fi book from Philip K. Dick. I mean, he's a sci-fi writer, pretty famous guy. He's the one who did Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is what Blade Runner was based off of. And then I guess Fallout 4 would have also been based off of it, because it's basically, I mean, the main storyline in Fallout 4 is basically Blade Runner. But this is actually the first Philip K. Dick book I've ever read. I found this on another YouTube channel. It's a guy I follow. Actually, you guys should go check him out, Silas Schmidt. He just read this, and he said it was an amazing book, and he sort of brought up how this book discusses really sort of deep Gnostic and Hermetic themes. So Gnosticism, Hermeticism, and a lot of stuff that I'm sort of like borderline into. A really quick disclaimer, I think this book is the closest. This book is like very borderline, I wouldn't say like schizo, it's like very borderline schizo. The guy in the book is schizophrenic. And I mean, interpret that how you will. If schizophrenia, sometimes they frame it in a way where schizophrenia means that he's actually in the real version of reality. They say that insanity is actually being sane. This book plays around a lot with inversion, the inversion of beliefs. There's a lot of stuff here between reflections or discussions in the book where you sort of ping pong between Christian monotheistic beliefs and then more Gnostic Hermetic themes, which we'll talk about all that. First of all, I'll give you guys a quick summary. So there will be spoilers in this. If you don't want spoilers, I'd really recommend checking out this book, but this video will have some spoilers. So VALIS, it's written in a way where it's not immediately apparent, but about halfway through you figure out that it's almost a fictitious autobiography that Philip K. Dick writes about himself. So the main, for instance, the main character in the book is horselover Fat, which is a very strange name. When we start off, it's very odd. You keep referring to him as horselover Fat, horselover Fat. Later, it's revealed that horselover, I have this written down, horselover is the Greek word for someone that loves horses is a Philip. So Philip, and then the German word for Dick is fat. So Philip K. Dick is horselover Fat, Philip Dick. That's when you sort of, I mean, you get that sense before they give you that bit of expose, but it is a fictitious autobiography. Basically, let me set this up for you. It's funny that I'm in California right now because the book does take place in Southern and Northern California, and so basically, there's this guy. He's like a normal dude. He's a science fiction writer. Somewhere in the early 70s. So in the 60s, he does like really hard drugs. He does a lot of like LSD, psychedelic stuff like that, which we're meant to believe sort of plays around with his brain chemistry. They sort of leave that there. They don't expand on it. And you're sort of meant to to use that piece of information to help you sort of decrypt later parts in the book. Whether or not things are, pure schizophrenic sort of manic episodes, or whether they are, our main character, our protagonist, seeing through the veil, right? Which we'll talk about. Again, this is going to be a long video, but this book is incredible, and I'd really recommend you guys read it. So basically, there's this guy, sci-fi writer. In the 60s, he does really, really hard drugs, starts hanging around different groups of people. In the early 70s, I think it's like 1974, a close friend of his commits suicide in Berkeley, I believe, so in Northern California. And so he's in Berkeley, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he witnesses it, or he sees at least the remnants of her body, where this girl, for whatever reason, she was depressed, or she was going through some mental illness, and she commits suicide by jumping off of a balcony or a roof, and he sees her splattered body right on the ground. And a lot of this video I'm going to interpret. This is my interpretation of the book, right? You guys can read it and see what you think really happened. But at this moment, he sort of has this psychotic sort of mental break. And essentially how he describes it is that there's this pink light. There's this color pink that he can only describe it as pink, but it's not the color pink. It's just this color, this warmth. It beams into his brain. And he believes that it's coming from this entity that he calls Zebra, which is all very cryptic, right? And this ties into the Gnostic themes, right? So Zebra beams this wave of energy into his brain, and then Horselover Fat goes insane. So basically, he starts speaking like Cuneic Greek. He knows Latin. He knows about past events that he hasn't ever, past events that he's never personally experienced. He knows like small things about history, historical facts, stuff like that. And he also starts having these really vivid dreams of future events. And he believes that, in a sense, he believes that he's met God. He believes that God is talking directly to him. Fast forward a little bit, he starts this sort of manifesto in his journal, and every day he sort of records messages or like bits of information. And I mean, Philip K. Dick includes the full manifesto as an appendix at the end of the book. And it's written in a way where it's very sort of cryptic, esoteric, like statements. Like I believe there's maybe like 50 statements, and each statement sort of is like this little pearl of wisdom. There's some statements, for instance, that say, I'll find one for you. Yeah, there's about 50 of them. So, for instance, it starts off by saying, "One mind there is, but under it two principles contend," which in my opinion, I think he's referring to, and they make mention of this, the sort of, if you guys are familiar with Parmenides, Plato's, like the Platonic theory of forms, and it's sort of like that there's a rational, perfect form of things, and then an irrational, sort of worldly form of things, in the sense that, when I say think of a chair, you aren't thinking of one chair in particular, but you sort of think of the perfect chair in your mind. That's a sidebar, but so essentially he starts this manifesto, he starts talking to his friends. The big sort of impetus for the story where things really kick off and sort of start hitting is that one of his friends, Philip, which is actually him in reality, so not his alter ego sort of psychotic, not Horselover Fat, but Philip, he tells him, he's like, "Man, you got to come see this new sci-fi film that they're showing at the theaters now. It's crazy, and it sort of lines up with what you've been saying that God has been saying to you." And they go see this film, and I mean, here Philip K. Dick sort of hits on, I mean, there's sort of like these sort of shallow themes, and then these deeper themes, right? So the deeper themes are these Gnostic and Hermetic beliefs, which we'll talk about, but on a very sort of surface level, he sort of shows the power of media and its ability to convey to the audience or to the viewer sort of subliminal messaging, right? So in the film, for instance, there's music, but it's not really music, it's just sort of an arrangement of sounds. And the sounds sort of lull him and sort of make him, he hears certain words that other people don't hear. He says the layman in the audience isn't picking up on the same sounds that he's picking up on. That him and Philip, which are again the same person, just him and his alter ego, are grasping. So there's this weird music that's made by this composer, Minnie. Then there's a lot of weird cuts in the film where things are happening out of order, which plays with time dilation, which is a huge theme in the book. Another sort of could be attributed to Gnosticism, but it also, if you guys are familiar with like holographic universe theory, which again, another video I want to do on that, but essentially the idea that time is, because time is created, right? I mean, if you believe in God, God created time, so time is something created. It doesn't exist outside of creation, and therefore, who's to say time is real in a sense? Time is in itself an illusion. There's this excellent part where he says, when they're trying to make the reader sort of understand time, and they say, what did they say? Yeah, so he says, oh, has it happened before and will it happen again? And I forget who tells him this, but they say, well, it just happened once, and every time in the future it happens again. It's still that one time. It's still the original happening, just at a later perceived time, if that makes sense. So the example that they give is that when you go and purchase a record from the record shop, the musicians played that song one time and it was recorded. But every time you play the record, you're hearing the music again in a new instant. But then he poses the question to the reader, which you're meant to think about, whereas, are the musicians playing again every time you play the record? No, they've only played once, but you're experiencing it again and again at later dates or later perceived dates. So that's like a cool concept, which we'll circle back to that. But essentially, they go see this film. There's a lot of weird stuff happening, and there's a lot of really, really heavy Gnostic themes where essentially in the film, there's like I think it's meant to be like President Richard Nixon, and they sort of say that it's like an alternative timeline of the Watergate scandal, where instead of Watergate, it's sort of, it's a guy called, his name's like Triple F, Frederick, Frederick, like 3 Fs, which they say that F is the 16th letter of the alphabet. It's very schizo, but F is the 16th letter of the alphabet, so FFF would be 666. So he's sort of meant to represent, I guess, like a, he's not necessarily meant to represent evil, but he's meant to represent Satan or an sort of an oppositional force, where he's ousted. So the president in this alternate timeline of the U.S. in the movie, he's employing these men in black. Black is another Gnostic theme, the black cube, which we'll talk about. But he's employing these men in black to sort of subdue the American public. And then there's this satellite, and this is where we finally figure out what VALIS means. There's a satellite called VALIS. So the movie's a sci-fi film. So in the movie, there's a satellite called VALIS, which stands for Vast Active Living Information System. And VALIS is sort of meant to represent like the highest level of gnosis, or like ultimate rationality. And VALIS is programming different people, which are mainly these 2 actors, Eric and Linda Lampton, which our character meets later in the book after he tracks them down. But they're programming them to sort of help them oust alternative Richard Nixon from office and save America. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that occur. But after that, the main character is able to go and find the directors of the film, Eric and Linda, and this is when the Gnostic stuff gets really heavy, because they say that they go back and forth, and they send a cipher to Horselover Fat, and only in his super crazed sort of schizophrenic state is he able to accurately reply to the cipher. I think they send him King, and he replies King Felix, which is meant to mean like the king of goodness, or like it's the Gnostic belief that, there's like these aeons or these ages of where different powers or sort of at the top of the hegemony, and this sort of signals that the new age has arisen where Felix is meant to be like prosperity and knowledge and information and all of this stuff, which again we'll talk about. Just give me a few more minutes because I just want to get through the book. But I have very strong feelings about what actually is happening behind the scenes in their sort of back and forth. So they go, horselover Fat, he goes with his friends, and they say that, hey, we actually, Linda, so the director and the main star, his real life wife and his wife in the film, just had a child, and this child, oh, that's super loud. Damn, there's a big ass crow. Oh, that's disgusting. I hate crows, but so they just had a child, and they say this child is like the savior. This child is VALIS, and they say that the movie, the sci-fi film, is not a movie. It's real life. This is really what's happening. They've just coded it in sci-fi. Come speak to the savior. They go. It's like a 2-year-old girl, but she's very eloquent. She speaks amazingly well. She has all of this future insight, and she sort of speaks almost like an oracle of Delphi, where it's sort of these riddles and phrases and indirect answers that lead our characters to the next part of their journey, which is a very short next part. It's sort of, we're nearing the end of the book now. But what's important is as soon as he meets the little girl, Philip, so that really Philip K. Dick, he looks over and horselover Fat isn't there anymore. And she sort of tells him, hey, when you underwent that huge amount of stress seeing your friend commit suicide, you know, and due to whatever sort of the changes in his brain chemistry because of like the hard drugs in the 60s, he created an alter ego and projected himself onto this alter ego to protect his mind. So as soon as he meets the girl, horselover Fat's done with. He'll come back later, but he's done with. So he looks around, horselover Fat's gone. We're now just with Philip and his friends. They sort of get to converse with the savior for a little bit, and then she sets them off. She says, you guys have to leave here. My parents are crazy, and you have to go find truth, right? Whatever truth may be. And she also has a very powerful part in the book where I think, based on, I'm not a scholar by any means, but based on my understanding of Gnostic belief, I think really helped me understand their framing, or the Gnostic sort of framing of reality, which we'll talk about. But they leave, come back to Southern California. I think it's a few weeks later, they find out that the girl died because the music producer, the one who wrote the score for the film, was trying to extract information from her. Some weird shit happened, and the girl died. Later we find out Linda, the girl's mom, is pregnant again. It's sort of left open-ended. We're not sure if she's going to have another savior, or if that's just sort of meant to be something to think about. They come back, and then they're sort of discussing what to do next. Philip seems to have calmed down a bit, and he's sort of settling in, trying to understand what he's going to do with the next part of his life, you know, because this is sort of a dead end now. They met the savior, and he thinks that, you know, all of these sort of schizophrenic, Gnostic, Hermetic sort of beliefs and messages that he'd been receiving has sort of gone cold, and he's sort of becoming more rational, more normal. It's at this moment that the book is wrapping up, where we find out that he starts getting postcards from horselover Fat. And my interpretation of this is he is sending his alter ego through this other sort of layer of reality across the world, sort of mentally teleporting to these different places. So horselover Fat goes to, I think it's Athens. He goes to, later he wants to go to Micronesia, and he's sort of trying to track down these artifacts or more clues that can help him understand what it was that God wanted, that he believed God wanted from him when he got that pink light transmission. We're approaching 20 minutes, so I want to get done with the summary quick. But it sort of wraps up there, and we're left with Philip sitting on his couch. It's sort of a beautiful, almost poetic ending where you have all of these major events happening, but now we're left with Philip sitting in front of his TV alone. All his friends have sort of gone out and are continuing to live their lives, getting engaged, running businesses, things like that. And his alter ego's returned and is now sending him postcards and updates because his quest, or his alter ego's quest, hasn't yet been fulfilled. That's it. That's how the book ends. So now that you guys sort of get a gist of the layout of the book, the structure, I wanted to touch on a few things that I thought were really important, and I have them written down here. So the first thing, if we sort of rewind a bit, was Philip K. Dick really tries to play around and make you think about the true nature of time and space, right? And I think one of the best ways that he does this is he mentions, so Richard Wagner has this, I believe it's like an opera and a play, it's called Parsifal. And in Parsifal, there are these two protagonists, or these two characters, and they're walking, and the world is changing around them, but they're staying still. They're not moving, in space, they're not moving. They're in the same place, but the world is being displaced around them. And ages are passing and rewinding, and the scenery is changing, and things are aging, but they have not moved. And the quote there is something that here time is, what does he say? He says something as if like, he tries to, I'm sorry, because it's hard for me to grasp as well, but it's sort of this notion that time is very much a construct that humans have sort of made good with, right? The actual notion of time it's very vague. No one can definitely say what time is. And when the characters are standing and things are changing around them, time hasn't actually progressed, but things around them are changing in a way that would lead them to believe that time has in fact progressed. And so Philip sort of mentions this to get you as a reader to think about the nature of time, and whether or not, if we apply it to reality, whether or not we are just stationary beings, and whether God is actually changing the condition of our bodies, changing the condition of the air around us, the sky, the buildings, cars, plants, nature, animals. If God is sort of making these things erode and sort of change their states in order for us to believe that time has existed, or time has passed, sorry. And he makes another very important point where this is one of the more Christian-heavy themes, Christian-heavy sections in the book, where he's talking about he baptizes his son. He baptizes his son with like a piece of a hot dog bun and some chocolate milk, and it's totally alone. It's in private, and he spills the son is I think a year old or 2 years old, and he spills some chocolate milk on his son's head, and he makes a cross on his forehead, and he baptizes him, and then he gives him some of the hot dog bun, which is meant to be sort of him taking communion, right? And he says that, or what I sort of gathered from that is that the rituals and the ceremonies and the culture that we as humans have made or have upheld, whether they be religious or cultural or whatever they may be, they in a sense combat time, because when he does that, he's teleported back. When he baptizes his son in the chocolate milk, he's teleported back to the days of early Christianity, right, in ancient Rome. And he says that this sort of time dilation, this superimposition of time, is achieved because the same ceremony that he does with his son in his apartment is the same ceremony that the early Christians were doing in early Rome. Nothing has changed. We're in the same place, but the things around us just look different. But time, in effect, time. Sorry, there's a helicopter. Time, in essence, hasn't passed. So that's something very interesting to think about. It's something I've been thinking about and sort of grappling with for the last couple months, because there's another book I've been reading called holographic universe theory. I'll do a video on that. But time is an interesting one. But then I guess we can move on now to, I guess, the main sort of meat of the book is dealing and sort of exposing the reader to Gnostic, Hermetic sort of beliefs, right?